Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for February 12, 2018. Just a note, Madam Chair, unfortunately, is a little under the weather, so Vice Chair will be in charge today, and she will read the Chair's comments.
Good morning, everybody. I have comments from Madam Chair, so I'm going to read those comments first, and then we'll proceed with our individual comments.
Okay. Decision items. Item number 1, 73786BZ, 3304 Amboy Road, Staten Island.
Okay. All Madam Chair wanted to know if everybody was okay with this. I am.
Yes.
Yep.
I would just note, I was looking at the application form, which indicated a request for a 20-year term. So I just wanted to put that on your radar as you decide
Okay.
what the duration of the term will be.
The prior terms have been 10 years. So I think there is no reason for us to be different. Does anybody have any?
No.
Item number 2, 6296BZ, 200 Madison Avenue, Manhattan.
Okay. Nothing was submitted. Actually, yeah.
As we deferring this? Yeah.
This has been deferred.
Item number 3, 2110BZ, 2801 Roebling Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay. Reading Madam Chair's notes, that plantings along the Roeblings were installed and were shown in the plans, and the noise readings of the menu board were taken to indicate the below noise code, that they were below the noise code requirements, but the meter used didn't provide the printout. So if somebody can submit the printout of that today.
There is no printout.
There was no backup data.
That
There was no
machine does
backup.
not provide a printout.
Yeah, the meter
The
they
meter
use.
does not provide.
The meter they use does not provide any.
Oh, okay,
any
yes, that's right,
printout.
I do remember.
That's what he said.
But the level of the noise was much below than one that we require. So we're okay with that? Is there any?
Yeah, as far as they provided the readings in their report, that's fine.
And neighbors have never stepped forward in complaint of it either.
Right, they've been notified, and thus far they have not.
Continued hearing items. Item number 4, 17395BZ, 30 East 85th Street, Manhattan.
Okay. Again, reading Madam Chair's comments first. The open question here is whether the split lot regulation of 77-11 applied to this site that is split between an R8B and a C51 zoning, which the applicant, regarding that, the applicant had submitted a DOB-approved plan from 1987 for the new building, and that indicates that the architect did note clearly that in the drawings that the portion of the lot that was in R8B was subject to 77-11, and that's would satisfy the questions that we had raised, and everything seemed okay. I also had, I think that the DOB notes were helpful in making that clarification, and I'm fine with it also. Anybody?
I have no question.
Okay.
Item number 5, 14307BZ, 6404 Strickland Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. Most of the comments were addressed. There's only one troubling comment about wanting occasional access to the roof for Sukkot. Once we have that, we need noise studies and efforts made to reduce the impact on neighborhoods. The drawings were revised, though there's a question that the chair had, which is how come there is no footings for the fire stairs at the cellar plan? The chair also recommends that the chain link fence along the property line be replaced with metal picket. And at the last hearing, the chair had asked that the bulkhead at the corners of the building be better integrated into the parapet design. This wasn't done, and it should be. The site being in the floodplain is subject to 2014 building code regulation. and that there should be specific DOB objections that were, we should have a specific DOB objection that was addressed in the approved plan concerning these issues, or a ZRD1, CCD1. Was the applicant notified about that? The need for ZRD1
no.
and CCD1? Because it's
Oh, that's
not been
Daryl's
as per
project.
our new administrative
They weren't
procedure.
notified? Okay. All right, well, they're on notice now.
Notice now.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Move on, Madam Chair.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Does anybody have it? Okay.
Okay. New cases, item number 6, 60-90BZ, 525 Forest Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay. So we have the proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Committee board recommended approval with one opposed and one abstention. The photographs that were provided were of poor quality, but they reveal the need for a cleanup near the refuse area, repair of slatting at the chain link fences, in the fenced area, the chain link fenced area, and clarification about the state of the planting along the property line. Specifically along the property line shared with the commercial use abutting along Forest Avenue. The planting is in pots and does not look like it's doing very well. So we would like to see some photos of the condition of the site in the rear of the property and some, especially that faces the residential property. I'm looking at my notes. I didn't have any comments, but any, yeah?
I have no comments.
Okay. Item number 7, 10192BZ, 66-98 East Burnside Avenue, the Bronx. It's an extension of term.
Yeah. So we have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Committee board informed us that they didn't have a quorum to vote on the application, but didn't see any concern. Since the variance expired in 2013, we need a proof of continuation of the use. The request is to change the condition of the prior grant that limited the number of parking spaces to 25 and allowed only 11 of those to be rented to the neighborhood, to the residents in the neighborhood. So we need to understand the reason why that restriction was imposed back in 2004. And according to the resolution, the Department of Consumer Affairs limits the site to only 25 cars. And maybe the limit to the number of spaces could be given to residents outside may have to do with the fact that this is accessory to commercial use and that a certain number of parking spaces had to be accessory to the users and the visitors, occupants of the commercial space. With regards to the site condition, it's not very appealing in this residential neighborhood, and the planting and the fencing look shabby and in need of repair. In addition, though there are high trees and vegetation, it doesn't serve to form a dense buffer screen from the neighborhood. There is also the barbed wire fencing that along one of the side streets, along the main entrance actually to the parking lot. And there are street trees referred in the 1993 resolution, so we need clarification where those street trees were planted, and also need clarification on the lighting on the lots and how it's affecting the adjacent residential windows. I had similar comments, which is basically I needed clarification on the 25 spaces and why 11 was being set aside for the residents and the remaining was for whom and how that was derived at. So those were my comments.
I had comments about the barbed wire. It's in pretty bad condition. It's
Right.
rusted over. It should be removed. And the plantings are pretty sparse if you go to the site, and they need to address that issue in terms of increasing the amount of screening.
Move on? Good, we're good? Okay. Item number 8, 35604BZ, 60 East 55th Street, Manhattan. It's an extension of term.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application, and there is no notice of hearing requirement for extension of time. The only comment Chair had was that a 2014 building code revision has taken place since the last approval, and the plans need to comply with that since the owner has not vested, and they also need to provide a firm map.
Madam Chair, I think you're,
Madam Vice Chair.
Madam Vice Chair, sorry. 35604 BZ, 60 East 55th?
What am I, oh, I'm so sorry, I read the one before. This is what happens when you flip the pages too quickly. I'm sorry.
Is this an extension of term?
Term.
My apologies. Okay, so this is 60 55th Street.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So we have the proof of service of initial application and the notice of hearing to official. CB5 waived their recommendation, and we need just a clarification that will be a 7 days per week, and the amended hours of operation that is that's being proposed is 5:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. is what is being requested. The 2016 TCO doesn't include floors 3 or 4 and does not mention the PCE on the 6th floor, so if you could provide a clarification. We need the proof of fire alarm installation. The sprinkler inspection report is there, so it's the fire alarm, and that is needed. There's also one massage therapist license, but the prior approval indicated that there would be 10, and most of the rooms in the species are treatment rooms. And yes, that was one of my comments, was that provide an updated count of on the massage therapists and their licenses. And I was just curious, is there a 5th floor? Because the plan just jumps from 3, 4, and then 6th. So I was just curious.
It also skips the second floor.
It also skips the 2nd floor, so
That's because the PCE is only on the first, third,
PCEs.
fourth, sixth, and sixth.
even the sections that were provided
I know, it's
just went
kind of
from
weird.
3, 4th, and 6th. So that's why I was just curious. Nothing to do with the hearing, but
And we sent the fire alarm and sprinkler information to DNY, so.
okay.
So it-
We're waiting to hear.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. May I move on?
Yeah. Thank
Item
you.
number 9, 5309 BZ, 540 Schenck Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, I think I'll reread my comments. We have proof of service of initial application, and since it's an extension of time, we don't need to provide notice of hearing. The only comment, again, the chair had was the 2014 building code revision has taken place, and since it's not vested, the plans need to comply with that, and they need to provide a firm map. I had no comments.
No comments.
Appeals calendar, continued hearing items, item number 10, 2017-25A through 2017-28A. This is 3094, 3098 Dare Place, and 3093 Castler Place, 3095 Castler Place, The Bronx.
Okay, you will have to bear with me. There's a lot of comments that the chair has provided, and I need to add them into the record. We received several submissions from the neighbors with photos of the height and tide level in front of the property. These are relevant to the questions of whether the waterfront yard that is required under zoning resolution section 62332 is being measured from the appropriate line. The applicant's submission didn't address this question by having the surveyor substantiate its determination of the high water line or dimensioning its location relative to the tax lot line. According to the ZR, zoning resolution that is, the measurement should be taken from the mean high water line, which is defined in the National Oceanic Atmosphere and Atmospheric Administration's website. And that clarification we would need. We also received some recent submission from the neighbors who had reached out to NOAA, but no official response to them was received on this issue. Now, we did receive some recent correspondence.
Sunday, I emailed
Sunday,
those
so I think
two
this-
things, two letters,
Right,
one
so
from
I
the
will-
neighbor and one mentioning this
Right,
NOA
so I
thing.
will pick that up in my comments. So I'll let this
Okay,
be just
fine.
chair comments for now. ZR 6213 states that the regulations of all other chapters of the ZR are applicable except as superseded, supplemented, or modified by this chapter, Article 6, Chapter 2, but that is not the event of the, but that in the event of a conflict between the provisions of this chapter and other regulations elsewhere in this resolution, this chapter shall control. This is a different standard than is typical in the resolution that instructs under 11-22 that in the event of a conflict, the more restrictive shall control. So our direction so far is clear. If it is covered in Article 6, Chapter 2, it controls overlapping regulations in other chapter. I'm not going to read the section of 6213. And ZR 6233 states that the yard regulation shall be governed by this section, and it converts the standard rear yard line to a side yard line, subject to the side yard regulation. There are no further instructions in this chapter on the side yard, so we have to go back to the underlying zoning for that. And ZR 62332 further states that the rear yard regulations are inapplicable and replaces rear yard regulations with waterfront yards and describes the minimum waterfront yard requirement. For the balance of the chapter, most of the provisions are inapplicable to the subject project or not relevant to the questions before us. So back to Article number 2, all we learn from Article 6, Chapter 2 is whether the side lot lines are, where the side lot lines are, and that there is no rear lot line and that there is a waterfront yard. Article 2 use regulations specifically in R31 lower density growth management area allows a semi-detached two-family residence under zoning resolution section 1210. A semi-detached building abuts along one side lot line surrounded by, on the other sides by yards, open area, or street lines. This is what we have here, abutting buildings, abutting along a side lot line as established by ZR 62331. Other side lot line requires an 8-foot side yard under ZR 23461B, and ZR 2349 also applies in an R31. It allows a new building to abut an existing building and two new buildings to abut each other along side lot lines, but implies from this caveat that the abutting walls are side walls and not rear walls. ZR 23711 addresses minimum distance between buildings on the zoning lot. ZR 23711F applies to R31 in low density growth management area, but is inapplicable in this case since the buildings are within 50 feet of the street line. Wall to wall requires a distance of 20 feet and the distance complies. There is the court regulation, and that may also apply in this project. 2386, minimum distance between legal windows and lot lines don't apply to residences in R3. 23811 doesn't apply since the buildings are within 50 feet of street line.
That's 23,880.
Sorry, 881. I need a better pair of glasses. But then there's 23891A. It appears to tear apart the semi-detached buildings in this case. It does this by requiring open space behind a building's rear wall and defining rear wall for the specific purpose of this section, hence not tying the definition to the location of the rear lot line, since we don't have one here, but to the orientation of the wall relative to the street. The other possibility is that 23891B actually applies to this lot since the house sits in front of, sits on and front a map street, for which it received GCL 35 waiver. In that case, the buildings sit on a corner lot and or front on two streets, and the rear wall can be designated and the depth of the required open area reduced to 20 feet. The project would then comply with all the provisions of the zoning regulation. If it is argued that 23891A should apply, however, the next question should be, does the rule of construction in Article 2, Chapter 6 supersede 23-891? ZR 62331 instructs that the rear lot line must be a side yard line, and you must follow the side yard regulation. Under those regulations, you must provide an 8-foot side yard or locate an abutting semi-detached building on it. The same regulations specifically state that no 30-foot rear yard is required anywhere on the zoning lot. 23-891 directly contradicts that instruction. I have few more to go, please.
Do you want me to read it, or you good? Keep reading?
Yep.
Okay.
This is still the chair's comments.
Yes.
I have my comments after that.
Okay.
At the last hearing, I asked the appellant to research similar sites to see whether they could establish how this provision has been applied in the past. They provided satellite images of similar dead-end streets, but didn't obtain the approved plans. This doesn't help us understand whether DOB has taken a different position in the past on this subject, in particular with the two projects approved in 2003 and 2005 on Weissman Avenue, where they're subject to the same provisions. Furthermore, I think Section 23-891 should not apply here from an urban design or a practical sense, since the evil it is attempting to prevent it is multiple buildings running front to rear on a zoning lot without adequate distance between them. 23-891B indicates to me that the drafters tried to anticipate the site condition that might not fit the stereotype, allowing corner lots or those with no frontage on a street or private roads to select their own rear wall. If 23-891 were to apply in this case, it would disallow what is allowed elsewhere in the same chapter, a semi-detached or abutting building. 23-12-2 allows semi-detached building in R31 in low density growth management area, which can only exist along a side lot line. Waterfront regs, perhaps nonsensically in this case, converts a rear lot line to a side lot line, apparently intending to reorient the building with its front or rear towards the water. Naturally, then the semi-detached abutting buildings would march along the waterfront, presumably facing a street that is parallel to the water. The collision of these two sections are a classic case of zoning regulations over-designing, and by doing so being too rigid to adjust to two different circumstances. My reading would not render 23-891 invalid as to all waterfront lots, since the vast majority of those lots orient in the way contemplated by the zoning resolution. In the subject neighborhood, where the blocks are only 100 foot deep and the zoning lots only 50 foot front to rear, where the history of the development in the area shows little open area behind one building and the other behind it on the adjacent lot, the regulations make no sense. I think those are chair comments. Now, I have a slightly different take from the chair, and my first question, and this I would like DOB to clarify, is I don't agree with the chair's take on which supersedes, and I would like clarification. When you have a low-density growth management area regulation and the waterfront regulation, which supersedes, or do they work in tandem? My take is they work in tandem, and I would like clarification on that, because I'm applying section Section 1100, which is the worst of you take the more conservative approach, so both shall apply. That's my take on it, but I would like clarification, and based on past precedent, how that has been applied by DOB. My take is that the portion of the rear lot line that intersects the shore line is a side lot line per 62331A and subject to the side yard regulation, and side yard regulation is inapplicable along the side lot line that are coincident with shorelines. In lieu of waterfront yards will be applicable. I am not sure if the proposed waterfront yard meets the required 62332, and want DOB to confirm that, which is what I was asking. Specifically, the depth is measured from the landward edge of stabilized natural shore or the mean high water line. What is being used to measure this 30-foot yard? And what was the initial objection? That is the other thing I want to know. What was the initial objection that was issued back in 2004? And where any of these yard issues or anything that were raised, I would like that to be clarified. We also received, subsequent to this document that we received from the chair, we had received some correspondence from the neighbors where they had reached out to National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, specifically with regards to what is mean high water line and where is the location of that, and the definition of shoreline versus mean high water line and which one applies. So we would like the clarification on that. And what was interesting in that correspondence, the person from the NOAA also raised the question about the survey that determined the high water mark, and that it was so far from the actual mean high water mark. And I'm not sure if DOB looked into that, if that's something that they do, but we do need clarification with regards to the shoreline and the mean high water line and how that was measured and the survey. Again, I'm not sure how the GCL 35 waiver would grant these sites as corner lots and be treated as that. So that's just a question I have. And I would like, if possible, some precedent that would clarify this.
So my understanding of the Department of Buildings argument, which I found convincing to me, was that the appellant was confusing rear yard with required open area at the
Yes.
rear wall. And so to me, the whole discussion about side yard, rear yard is irrelevant.
Can you repeat what you just said? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. The
Oh.
appellant is confusing.
The rear yard with the required open area at the rear wall.
Right.
And then for me, the whole discussion of yard requirements becomes irrelevant because we're not talking about a required rear yard. We're talking about required open area at the rear wall, and the rear wall is defined as the wall opposite the front wall, and the front wall is the wall
Right.
that has frontage on the street.
Right.
And so in these cases, the front walls of these homes have frontage on either Dare Place or Castler Place, and so therefore, the rear space that is required in the rear is exactly where those two homes abut in their rears. And so for me, I see it as a case of you can't have that kind of a home here. You can't have that kind of a semi-detached home.
I agree with you. And typically semi-detached homes, while it does say it has to be on two separate zoning lot, semi-detached homes in per zoning regulation does require rear yards. And so that's why we never see back-to-back semi-detached. We see semi-detached side to side because they have to provide rear yards. And so that's why I go back to the question of which one which one is governing, the lower density growth management or the waterfront regulation. If the waterfront regulation supersedes it, then Chair's point is valid. Then you have to treat everything as a side yard and then there's no rear yard. But
This isn't talking about a rear yard, though. It's talking about a required open area at the rear wall. That's
Right.
not a rear yard, and that's not subject
Well,
to any rear yard requirements. So
my-
that's why I'm confused by this whole, to me, this is a diversion from the real issue. I could be wrong, but to me, Department of Buildings is very clear. Their paperwork is very clear that this is not a rear yard situation. This is required open area at the rear.
Right, and I think the Section 1100 does allude, I go more by that, where you have two sets of rules that are, you take the one that's more conservative and apply that. If that's the case, then I would use the rear wall as the argument, and I'm with you on that one. And then there,
I guess we'll
So-
have to see.
do you have any comments? Okay. So please come prepared to answer these questions and give us as much guidance to help us understand the issue. Thank you.
New cases, item number on.
Yes, please. Thank you.
New cases, item number 11, 2017, 103A, 3924 Victory Boulevard, Staten Island.
All right. So we have proof of service of the initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Committee Board 2 voted in favor. And this is a very long, narrow site that is being subdivided into thirds, requiring one of the houses to be located at the back of the site with a long 20-foot wide driveway. The plans calls for a required parking for the 2 Victory Boulevard fronting house to be located behind the house on what looks like a different tax lot. Actually, I can't figure out where the tax lot and the zoning lot lines are. The plan reads that people who live in front house have to park their cars at the back of the private driveway and walk along it to get to their house. There is no sidewalk along the driveways, since doing so would reduce the travel width of cars to 14. Drawings state that only the rear building will be sprinklered. Statement of findings states, fact states that all the buildings will be sprinklered. FDNY plans state that all the buildings shown on the approved drawing shall be sprinklered. So please clarify that. Furthermore, statement of fact states that the hardship to be satisfied by GCL waiver is the inability to develop the lot without this waiver, but the 2 front houses have inadequate side yard conditions and really are squashed onto the lots, or at least appear to be, since the driveway to the rear house isn't exactly the same as a side yard. Isn't that the lot that is actually more suitable for 2 houses only with 1 front and 1 rear versus a reasonable sized driveway? Demonstrate that the distance between the houses on the adjacent zoning lots and the permitted obstruction in the side yards complies with zoning resolution section 23461C 1-3 and 2564. Provide calculations and surveys with distances to adjoining properties. The Schedule A related to budgeting for costs and reserves for the HOA states that each individual homeowner insurance will have to cover the cost of repair for the sewer. How would that work? Aren't they running in common until the point where they branch off the main to the individual house? Shouldn't this be an HOA obligation? HOA and easement decks have to be amended to reflect 3 homes instead of 5. There is an easement deck in favor of FDNY. They also need to review it to be sure that it is what they want to see. I don't find maintenance obligation imposed on HOA or individual homeowners or acknowledgement that they are obligated to install and maintain sewers and roadway and signage on that, or that the FDNY can enforce against them for parking in the roadbed. I'm also not sure that I found a cross easement for access by each property owner onto the other land. If it is in these documents, please show us. We shouldn't have to read 100 pages, okay. FDNY signed off on this in November with conditions, and the conditions are that the proposed 2 family residence must be fully sprinklered as indicated in the approved plan. No parking signage must be posted as required by fire code. All illuminated sign must be mounted at the location indicated in the approved plan, identifying the address of the proposed resident, and the location of the proposed new fire hydrant shall be installed as indicated in the approved plan. They also need to provide a firm map, and DEP's January 9, 2018 letter said that they had no objection to the GCL application. And we would, of course, want to impose conditions that the house be fully sprinklered and no parking permitted within the easement bed. Anything else that you want to add? Let me look at mine. Yeah, I had the similar comments that the HOA drafted referred to 5 homes as opposed to 3. And those were.
No, similar.
No comments.
Okay, item number 12, 2017-193 to 199A, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 17, Tupelo Court, Staten Island. These are proposed constructions of residential buildings.
Okay, this is also, Chair had a lot of comments, so please bear with me. We have the proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials. Notice to neighbors isn't required by the board for these applications, but we have neighborhood input. Our rules will eventually be amended to require notices for these. So I could. Committee board recommended disapproval for this application and generally opposing all GCL 36 waivers. They also voted to oppose the CPC actions on this application, citing concerns about the protection of wetlands, school crowding, and traffic concerns about the standard use for the perk test. We have 4 letters, I think we may have by now a little bit more than 4 letters of opposition from neighbors, including the Richmond Town and Clark Avenue Civic Association. The association wants the property included in the Richmond Creek Blue Belt. This letter refers to zoning resolution section 7221, but this is for GCL 36. This is before us for GCL 36 waiver, so the findings are different. They state that the site is Class 1 freshwater wetland. DEC needs to opine on this, but apparently allowed for a 60-foot buffer zone prior to 2012. The architect's recent letter explains that DEC studied the stormwater flow and determined the project would not decrease it. We will ask both DEC and DEP to comment on concerns about flooding given post-Sandy condition, where these taken into account when the permits were renewed in 2015. There are also older letters of opposition to the project from then Council Member James Otto and then Staten Island Borough President James Molinaro, State Senator Andrew Lanza, Assembly Member Cusick, and then Member Borelli and Tobacco, and many other elected officials and civic association. DCP in 2013 approved the site for special natural area compliance, and a DP easement area was created to protect it. That approval shows the right to build on the site further up Richmond Road to a much shallower place, restricting the balance behind it to natural area easement. I'm curious how they concluded that this site could be built deeper. Notably, some of the areas to be built on it shown on the topo map with a 25% or greater slope, and some of the houses sit within what one survey map showed as a 100-foot deep wetland adjacent area. One letter states that this development is part of a larger development that does not require GCL waiver. We should see the scope of the entire development. Is it the 13 homes only referred to in the September submission from the applicant, other than often these applications come to us in pieces and we can't see the effect that our approvals of the small pieces will have on the community developments that are too large should go before DCP for mapping actions, since these will undergo more extensive review in a multi-agency conferences to consider wide-reaching potential impact. On site plan, one of the site plans shows 4 more houses to be developed on the site between the subject and the earlier development with 4 houses. Are the various agencies aware of this when calculating stormwater absorption rate, etc.? Some of the houses are located in the bed of map Mace Street, for which a GCL 35 waiver was obtained in 2012. We asked in the NOC for a copy of the BP's map and didn't receive one. We should have one. And the opposition claims that the site is in flood zone A. However, the preliminary firm map from 2013 shows it's outside that zone. Regarding 7 and 8 Tupelo Court, emails between DOB Commissioner Marciano and Civic Association indicates SWO was issued in September, but I see a November and January building permit and no SWO. The response to NOC in September argues that the board should not be inquiring about DEC permits requirement to, should not be inquiring about a DEC permit requirement to be provided as a proof that the map streets were demapped because it is a settled issue. I see the letter from DEC to former BSA Executive Director Jeff Mulligan dated 3 March 2012 with words to that effect, but that predates Sandy. If I understand it correctly, the letter only referred to whether the GCL 35 waiver was valid. Please explain this further. DEP signed off on the water and sewer system in August. Regarding 2015 DOT approval, approved BPP, why doesn't the sidewalk and the curb line up with the, why doesn't the side lot and curb line line up with the existing conditions on the southeast corner of the property. The sidewalk is significantly reduced in width and there is no planting area. The other 4 houses down the street were approved with a sidewalk that breaks continuity, but the apparent reason for that was to increase the width of Richmond Road. There is still a wide sidewalk and planting area in front of each house. And then there is the modified BPP that has not been approved by DOT, but rather shows the sidewalk veering deep into the property to avoid 2 trees. I don't understand this at all. Just widen the sidewalk to accommodate the trees. It actually sends a pedestrian on a very long chase that would not be survived from the street. I don't see anything in the HOA or declaration that indicates ownership of Tupelo Court or the maintenance obligations by the HOA or of enforcement by FDNY for parking in the no parking area or locations of required no parking sign. If the document does that, please show us where it is. And we don't have an FDNY sign off.
No, not yet, no.
Were there other comments?
No, that's it from the chair.
I think my comments were with the HOA. It was not clear how that was going to be maintained, and I felt that since this project has received in the past prior approvals, and if the conditions and the requirements and the standards have not changed, and if they still hold, and those were really my main questions.
I had the same question about the HOA not mentioning the maintenance of the street or the parking enforcement.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No.
Item number 13, 2017-218A, 35 House Street, Staten Island. It's a GCL 35.
Okay. We have proof of service of initial application and proof of notice of hearing to officials. Committee Board 1 recommended approval. We have DOT sign off that the road is not part of the capital improvement plan. However, DOT objects to the application. This is, that is a pretty strong response. We don't get that very often. And FDNY signed off on this in July. And I just want to read what DOT indicated. It said, according to the Staten Island Borough President Topographic Bureau, North Burger Avenue at this location is mapped to 60 feet and the city has no title. At this time, we have reviewed all pertinent documents submitted to our office by the BSA. DOT does not have a current capital project to improve North Burger Street. However, DOT objects to the proposal because the development of Block 302, Lot 19 denies DOT the ability to open this street to improve circulation in future. FDNY has signed off on this with conditions that the proposed residence must be fully sprinkler, our hydrant must be located within 250 feet of the main front entrance, and 2 off-street parking spaces must be provided. November 2017, a DEP letter was provided, which still has an open issue, and the open issue is that the applicant submitted material that it still didn't address DEP's issue, and DEP was that DP required a 35-foot wide sewer corridor easement in the bed of map North Burger Street between Howe and Bosworth Street for the installation, maintenance, and/or reconstruction of the future and existing sewer and water main, or the applicant has the option to amend the drainage plan.
Can I interrupt you and say one thing? The applicant's going to have another meeting with DEP, I think, February 20th, I think. Also, just as a note, I don't know if council wants to state, we had a recent conversation with DEP regarding the issues when this comes up with amending of the drainage plans. They want to see the actual drainage plan, and they want for the board to wait for them to approve the amending of the drainage plan. It recently came up in an issue in a case we just approved, and where DEP had an issue with the amended drainage plan, which created a situation which is now being reviewed again at DEP. So just putting the applicants on notice that if they elect to option the amending of the drainage plan, they have to submit an amended drainage plan to DEP, and we will now wait for a response from DEP. We will no longer state that the amending of the drainage plan will be prior to permits and at the satisfaction of DEP as a condition on our resolution.
Okay.
Okay? I'm sorry, you may go on.
No. I do
just-
have, I think the applicant did respond to DEP's last letter saying that doing an amended drainage plan was cost prohibitive.
Right, and so they're meeting with them
it would-
again.
So.
I just
think
wanted to
this is
put that on
something
the
they need
record.
to- Right, they need to
Yeah.
resolve it and then come to. Why does BPP show only a portion of the frontage of Howie paved and with a sidewalk, and has DOT looked at the treatment of the dead-end condition? I had questions. My question was if the tax lot, I'm looking at the tax lot that was submitted, which shows it's 173 foot wide, but I believe that it was subdivided and there's a DOB approval. So the site has been subdivided into 4 lots, and the lot that is before us for GCL is the lot that is on the map street. The other 3 are being built as of right. And the question I had was, what is the minimum easement width that would be required for a sewer corridor? The DP letter says 35. Can it be less? And the reason I'm asking that question is the ownership, all these 4 lots are same. And the requirement of an R3 district is a lot width of minimum 35 feet of a lot area of 3,325 square feet. The lots that have been carved out that are not subject to this action are much bigger than that. So if there's a way to meet the minimum requirement, you might be able to have a lot where you have enough of a building footprint and be able to leave some easement, sewer easement that DEP would require. Maybe not 35, maybe something less. Just something I'm throwing out there, and if that would address the issue.
I had just one question about the whole idea of the sewer easement. This is a lot that is at the end of a street of other lots that have already been developed with homes that probably have connected to a sewer. So my question is, why do you have to maintain the sewer easement within this lot if this lot could possibly connect to a sewer that's already existing?
So this is a more question for DEP.
Right, I get, yeah, it's just me raising the question, is because it just seems like providing this easement takes up the entire lot. You would not be able to develop it. So the question is it really necessary, as long as they can hook up somewhere else?
Right, it's not clear whether the existing ones are outdated, they need to be updated, and because of that, the North Burger is required. It's not clear from DEP's point of view, and if,
Perhaps when they meet with DEP next.
Right.
they can bring that up.
right.
Just one other thing, I don't have it in the record, I have to add it. There was from a couple of months ago, the borough president had raised an issue about ownership of unmapped record portion of Howe being used for access. So I asked the applicant to take a look at that, and he said he conferred with his team and engineers that Howe is a final map street with a CCO that terminates at the intersection of the map lines for Howe and North Burger. They did a title report, and no one owns the bed of Howe. However, being that it's the final map and not privately owned, the owner is permitted to open it for use, and the owner is responsible for the improvement and maintenance of the street within their property frontage for the entire frontage and the width of 1/2 + 5. So, that was a question that came up, just putting it there on the record.
Any other questions?
Anything else? That's it, move on. Okay, zoning calendar, decision items, item number 14, 330-14BZ, 1746 East 21st Street, Brooklyn.
Chair had no comments other than that there would be a condition, the standard condition that will be imposed, that removal of existing building material in excess of what is shown on the approved plan will void the special permit. Also filing in filling in the double height space in attic over the master bedroom will void the special permit.
Item number 15, 1346 East 27th Street, Brooklyn.
Again, right, the applicant did add a note to the drawing regarding DOB to determine whether it would be a cellar or a basement. Otherwise, had no comments. I think submission was acceptable. Anything?
I believe what the chair requested last hearing is to add a note to the plans
Right.
saying that the determination of the lowest floor as cellar or basement with regard to the floor area calculations shall be made and reviewed by the DOB.
Right.
When I read the note that is added to the plan, I don't think it is consistent with the spirit of that
Why, what does
wording.
the note actually say?
It says layout of the lowest floor subject to DOB approval.
That's generally what we accept as a
Yes,
note on the
yes.
plans, that it is subject to DOB, that then takes it out of our purview, and then it instructs DOB to examine the issue, and they can opine on it and make a determination as they see fit.
Should we like ask them to amend this note to mention that DOB should look at the floor area calculations with respect to?
Well, that would automatically happen. Once it's determined whether it's a cellar or a basement, that would automatically revise the zoning.
So they will
floor area
take that into
Yeah.
account?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, to clarify, the resolution will
Okay.
be clear
Okay.
about the board not allowing anything over than what's been asked for in this
Right.
case. In the case that DOB does evaluate and says that it's a basement and it has to be included in floor area.
Okay.
Madam Vice Chair, may I go on?
Just give me 1 second.
Okay, sure. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 16, 2016-4340BZ, 13102 40th Road, Queens.
So we do have a plan that is signed and sealed by a licensed surveyor, stating that all the elevations and the datum indicated relative to the maximum allowable FAA height determination in NAVD 88, NGVD 29, and AMSL has found that all of those are accurate, okay? So we also have the latest letter from FAA dated 1/11/18, based on the revised drawings, and I think everything is good. So, thank you.
Continued hearing items, item number 17, 9114BZ, 3420 Bedford Avenue, Brooklyn. Got it?
Sorry, just, I'm getting to the page. We last heard this application in December 2016 with four adjournments since. There was a submission in January 2017 in preparation for a February 17 hearing, 2017 that is, which was discussed in detail at the review session, but on the day before the hearing, the applicant submitted an adjournment request and didn't appear at the hearing. On January 8, 2018, we received a letter requesting withdrawal of the application, and then on January 25th, we received another letter and a submission stating that the withdrawal was made in error. The submission is a legal argument opposing the board's 50% wall and floor retention standard for a 73-622. This standard has been board's practice for many years, and in an effort to make the standard even clearer, the board has refined exactly what can reasonably be included in that 50%. There were no further submissions of drawings or studies that address our comments from the February 14, 2017 review session. So as I see it, as I see it, given the applicant has literally had a full year to respond to these comments and chose not to, we can either vote to dismiss the case for failure to prosecute or vote on the February 14, 2017 submission, which we stated did not meet the neighborhood character finding for many reasons too numerous to repeat here. Our comments are readily available on YouTube. My comment is more around the neighborhood character, and that is that while the proposed project, while it may not impair future use or development of the surrounding area, it will alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Regarding the letter that we had received from DCP back in 1999, this is dated 9/21/1999, which was very specific to a case that was before us with regards to 2 existing homes on adjacent lots that were being demolished to construct a single detached home. The letter drew attention to the fact that a new, larger lot was being created, significantly larger than those in the surrounding homes on the blocks. This block typically has 40-foot by 100-foot lots, and also the blocks fronting Bedford, block 7661. Even a relatively large zoning lot like zoning lot 31 on block 7661 has 2 separate buildings. So it appears that these are 2 separate lots. And the proposed building, whereas the proposed building is a continuous structure. The building width diagram that was provided by the applicant in 2017 is also quite telling. The proposed building width will be 85% in comparison to a typical width, which ranges from 55% to 75%, and this is not counting BSA special permits. And even that received BSA special permit in this area, the building width ranged anywhere from 63% to 80%, and what the applicant is requesting is an 85%. So my concern is just with the neighborhood character, and if the building could have been designed in a way where it reduces that, I would have thought differently about it. Any comments?
Well, what is going to be the decision? Are we going to be voting on this, or are we going to vote to dismiss?
It's up to the vice chair.
I think we should, I feel we have not received any new additional documents, so I don't think we are going,
I'd say that.
I'm going to take a lead from council on this, because this is kind of,
Well, the chair, as the comments you read, suggested they've had a year to provide comments in response to your concerns. You stated your concerns about neighborhood character hearings before.
Right.
We could defer this decision to a future hearing when the chair can be here to make the motion, if the vice chair is not comfortable making the motion. We can do it in 2 weeks. We have some spaces available. We can close and just defer the decision until the chair is here to make that motion. If you want purposes of the record to say your notes, let's presume we're going to vote on the request and not dismiss. So we have all of the notes in the record.
Okay,
The
so
purpose
if
of
we're
this,
going
I
to
would say
assume
read the
that,
notes. Yes.
then I'm going to state that I'm in agreement that this is within what we have previously approved for special permits before. The only difference here is that the zoning lot is much larger. We have had other cases where we've had several tax lots that have been put together as one zoning lot. And in those cases, the existing buildings, one or two of them were demolished, and then the remains of the remaining building on one of those original tax lots has been enlarged across the other tax lots that make up the new zoning lot. And so, other than the size of this zoning lot, I don't see any other difference. And I also, in all of the different criteria that we use to determine whether or not a property is within the character of the neighborhood, I don't see where this deviates from the acceptable range that we voted yes on prior to this. And so if you're going to vote on the merits of this case, I'm going to vote yes.
okay.
So that's just to put everybody on notice. I don't know if that affects whether or not you have to defer the decision to a future time, if there's only 3 of us, or if it doesn't.
It doesn't, it's up to the vice chair.
Well, I'm not sure if,
I wasn't here from the beginning, but I believe, I believe nothing new was submitted. I did look at the withdrawal letter, and I'm not sure how somebody could send a withdrawal letter by mistake. Withdrawal letter is a letter that is written and reviewed and then sent via email. I believe somebody could get an error typing a letter, but not like writing the whole letter with a subject line and then send it to the board and then come back later and say, hey, we sent this by mistake. I don't.
so actually, I'm trying to get and I should have asked this question separately. Would you be abstaining or would you be voting?
I would, if I'm gonna vote, I'm gonna vote yes for dismissal, not
So if it was
approving.
voted on the merits, you would not, you
Yes.
would abstain? You would not
Probably,
vote?
yes,
Okay.
yes, probably, yes.
So then there won't be
So
a
there wouldn't
quorum
be a quorum.
tomorrow.
Right.
So you
So
would
we
have to
should
So
defer.
we
You
should
should defer
defer.
this.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
And I just want to say that while one might raise their eyebrows to a withdrawal letter that's submitted and then taken back, I think it should be treated like anything else that's submitted prior to a vote.
I agree.
It's been voided.
Yeah.
Right.
And so therefore, it shouldn't be considered, nor should we be thinking about what the down secret as
Right.
to why and strategy as to why they submitted it. It's voided.
Right. I
agree.
So
Yeah, I
I wouldn't
agree.
even be
Yeah.
talking
Right.
about
And
it.
there was nothing
frankly.
procedurally
Right.
prohibiting
Right.
them from
Exactly.
requesting that, and it
Or
was,
from withdrawing their withdrawal.
Right.
right, and it was done expeditiously
Yeah.
Right.
after submitting the initial. I think my understanding was there may have been some miscommunication, client, and
It's irrelevant.
It
The
doesn't
point
matter.
is, I think that's in file, but we are just going to look at the latest submission, and we are going to base it on the merits of the latest submission and the initial submission that was made in 2017. And I
And
agree
the
with you.
latest submission was timely.
Yes,
as
the
well,
rest is-
so-
yes, exactly. So I guess we will have to then defer this decision. We don't have a quorum.
Okay, next item, item number 8.
Just give me
I'm
one
so-
second, I just.
Sure,
need to
I'm
put
sorry.
My note.
Sure.
and just, right, this is not, this hasn't been closed, so tomorrow's would be a continued hearing.
Yeah.
So if this is to be moved to decision, maybe the board should consider whether closing it or not tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay?
sorry, please
That's okay.
continue.
No. Ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Item number 18, 12815BZ through 13015BZ, 680, 682, 684 Van Duzer Street, Staten Island.
Just, all right, so. We have comments regarding DCP?
That's it.
So we do have comments regarding DCP, recommending terracing, where those changes made to the plans, and
Yes,
they were?
Well, we couldn't, some of the terracing was located off the zoning lot, so we had them put a note that the final terracing off of the zoning lot would be approved by DCP.
Okay. All right, thank you. And provide elevations of all 4 sides of the building, only the front was provided. Also provide the roof plan. BPP was supposed to be amended. Is it there? Do we?
I think they were waiting that to that effect to see how the
Some of it.
progressing. But they can confirm that tomorrow.
Change to the construction cost estimates were made, and an explanation given that the claims there doesn't result in double dipping. The as-applied cost estimate does not appear to have been modified, but for the proposed, the cost of board street work went up by $35K. My comments, I had none. I think they have responded to the questions, and the fact that DCP has weighed in on the terrace, the comments would be included. That addresses my concerns. Any?
I had made financial comments at the previous hearing, And the site value was changed, the methodology used to value the site in line with what I requested by dividing the site into the usable land area and the unusable land area and valuing both separately, then adding them together. This resulted in the site value going up very slightly, and that is fine. I had made a comment, and this was more of a comment about the report and whether or not it actually had inconsistencies. Not really substantial inconsistencies, but inconsistencies in terms of the numbers on page 6, page 15, and page 17. They made corrections to one of the pages, but the other 2 pages are actually still different from the first page, and this has to do with the proposed hard construction costs. On page 6, it's 1.218 million, and on page 15 and 17, it is still 1.157 million. So if they can make that change prior to the hearing, that would be great. It's just pulling out pages and substituting it in. They also adjusted the comparables differently for the townhome values, and that brought the sales prices upward for the townhomes. They adjusted it upwards by 10%. I had suggested higher, but when I substitute in a higher sales price, it really doesn't make that much difference in the overall return, so I will accept what they have submitted.
Okay. Any comments?
I'm good.
Okay.
Item number 9,
Just give me one second.
let me know when you're ready. Before I call.
I don't type very fast.
No, that's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Item 19, 27515 BZ, 115 East 97th Street, Manhattan. You want me to read it?
You can start reading.
You want me to start it, or you want me to do
Okay,
it?
I got
turn
it,
it on.
it's fine. Okay, so this is from Chair Perlmutter. We have a letter from Councilman Kalos expressing support for the revised project. We received 4 additional letters of opposition concerned about the height of the proposed building, construction duration, and impacts. One of the opposition letters is from Council, representing 112 through 114 East 98th Street. Council's letter includes a letter from a civil engineer arguing that a traffic study should be conducted to consider impacts of the proposed 98th Street drop-off, due in part to an existing parking garage on 98th Street adjacent to the subject site with 170 parking spaces. Council's letter also states that the proposed building is encroaching on 112 through 114 East 98th Street's property. This is a civil matter that must be resolved by the 2 property owners. The survey submitted to the board by the applicant shows the building adjacent to the subject site encroaching on the subject property. The applicant should respond to council and the engineer's comments. Regarding the lot coverage calculations, I don't see the math working. If in an R72, a maximum lot coverage is 65% for both community facility and residential, that is 17,052 square feet total coverage permitted. If the existing residential building covers 3,868 square feet and the proposed building covers 13,554 square feet, that total is 17,422 square feet and exceeds the maximum allowable. Since that excess is due in part to the residential coverage, we cannot waive it. I don't believe the architect is correct that you can look at the community facility lot coverage independent of the residential lot coverage. See zoning resolution section 24-165, which relates to lot coverage for zoning lots containing community facility and residential uses. The tower coverage also exceeds the 40% maximum allowable in the R72 by approximately 1,000 square feet for the community facility building as a standalone. But my understanding of the tower coverage regulations is that you also must include all buildings on the zoning lot at the level at which you calculate the coverage, and there is an 18-story residential building on this portion of the zoning lot as well. To the extent that that puts the proposed building even further outside of compliance with the tower regulations, we cannot waive it. But I frankly am not understanding why for a 10-story building, the architects are treating the top 2 floors as a tower. Operational program for restricting interaction between residential building users of the roof and students will be included as a condition to approval and described in the resolution. Please put notes on the plans indicating how that will be done. Regarding the rooftop use and the as-of-right, statement of facts states that the as-of-right roof wouldn't meet all of the 7,745 square feet of open space needed to satisfy the residential building requirements. But would it satisfy 2,950 square feet and therefore allow a larger as-of-right floor plate? I think the response at the hearing was that the rooftop configuration wouldn't meet open space requirements. That wasn't what was stated in the statement of facts. The curb cut is indicated on the plans as being non-compliant.
Is a waiver being sought for that from the BSA? Drawings say yes. If so, we need to hear from DOT about whether it is acceptable. With respect to the 2-foot incursion into the rear yard, I don't see why, other than at the theater level, it can't be reduced for everywhere but the elevator wall and columns like it is on the 6th floor. What is the status of the Phase 2 report and air quality review? We received firm map. A site is not in flood zone. And then for our resolution, she notes, the BSA is not opining on whether the roof areas on the school building meet the requirements of 24-164 for residential open space. And as stated in the cover letter, no waiver of the residential lot coverage or open space requirements is being sought here. Also, the operational program for restricting interaction between residential building users on the roof and students will be included as a condition to approval and described in the resolution. Put notes on the plans to indicate how that will be done. And then she says, condition with cones to keep the area open. I imagine this is in front of the school for the drop-off area. 4 shuttles a day, staff to move parents along, 2 late morning buses, and 2 afternoon buses. Those are her notes.
Okay. I looked through the comments and I felt that they were responsive to all our questions, and I had no comments.
I have no comments.
I just have one comment regarding the noise study by AKRF. In the conclusion portion says that generally indicate the proposed use at different areas, including ground floor garden court, the 5th floor south terrace, and the roof terrace, wouldn't have the potential to result in substantially increased noise levels at the adjacent residences. I don't know, I can't understand the definition of substantially increased noise. If they can give us like some commitment that this is not gonna impose any disturbing noise to the neighbors, some sort of quantification if they can do that, if they can quantify the increase in decibels, or they can give us like a statement saying that the increased noise will be like bearable by neighbors, that would be more
I think
helpful than
what
the
about-
current statement.
Okay, what about, I think, one way would be to go about what our zoning technical manual, secret technical manual requires, and if it is within those standard guidelines, would that be?
It would, I'm not sure if they did any like measurements. I looked at the report and I didn't see any
Okay,
measurements.
so maybe they need to clarify how they did the study, and then based on that, we can follow up on the question.
Yep,
We
yep.
received sign off on the noise from,
Okay.
but this seems like you're asking for more information.
So this was noise sign off from DEP?
The reason I'm concerned, because it's not deterministic approach. It sounds like it's based on experience. It's not gonna increase substantial noise increase. What is substantial noise increase?
So Okay, so I think hearing what you're saying and the fact that we have a noise sign off from DEP just would be helpful for somebody from the applicant to walk us through what the requirements of the noise review per secret standard is, and how it meets those requirements, because those are the things that have to be met. If it meets those requirements, then I think this noise study, the terminology to me is irrelevant, because if they meet the DEP noise analysis and DEP has signed off on it.
Okay.
So we would like them to kind of just give us a little bit of clarification how they arrived at that. Thank
We
you.
also have sign off on the wrap and chas. We just need a updated EAS with all the sign offs.
The other thing is that during the last executive session for the same case, we mentioned that we don't have subsurface report in file, and they are talking about rock elevation and.
I think that's, given that this is, okay, go ahead.
I know it's not going to happen that they could push the gym down. Right now, I understand that the lowest floor elevation is about 40-plus feet below grade. I don't think it's going to be feasible for them to dig more than that, but just because they are talking about rock, we need to get a copy of the geotechnical report and keep it in our file.
But just to flag, this isn't a unique physical condition
not citing-
application. It's a
yeah.
school, so they have deference, so they don't have to prove that they
Yeah,
have.
I understand, but because they are talking about that in their statement of facts, we want to just we don't want somebody talking about rock elevation, and then we've been asked, what is the rock elevation, and we say, no, we don't know. So if we can get a copy of the geotechnical report, just to keep it in our files.
I'm still not quite sure the connection between that and the findings, because they have not cited the rock as a condition for not being able to go below grade. Despite the rock, they are going as far down as they can to programmatically put as much of the voluminous structure below grade.
Yes.
So, and they have not cited that as a hardship, so I'm not sure of the connection between the two, and therefore requiring it to be on file.
Yeah, but basis of their application isn't that the rock is preventing them from building as of right. It's that
I
their
understand.
program.
Yes,
Right.
but I have read the statement of fact, and I'm in agreement with what they are saying, and I want to make sure that what they are saying is intact, even if they are not basing their request on that.
Yes, but the bottom line is they are building below grade,
Right.
and they are putting a large amount of the space below grade. It really isn't relevant for this case. This is a programmatic needs case. This has to do with fitting as much of the program into this building as possible, and they are going below grade. I could see maybe you would request that information if they're saying, because of the rock, we can't go below grade, and so we're starting at grade and going up. But this is not that case. I believe they have a subcellar, a cellar, and a basement. So they're going as far down as one would expect them to. So I don't think you need to have a report, and it actually is going to make it that much more difficult for this case to get resolved. And this is a case with the school. The school is in need of the space. We need to move fairly quickly on this, and we can't keep stretching this out for asking for information that we don't really need to make the determination.
Actually, they said in the statement of facts, they said that they cannot put the gym deeper because of the rock condition. I'm not saying, I'm asking
Would
them
you
to
feel more
put-
comfortable if they just strike it from the
Yes,
statement?
yes,
Yep.
yep.
Then
Yep.
strike it from the statement.
Got that?
We also have air quality.
And that would conclude all the
Yes,
environmental and...
as soon as we
the-
receive the final EAS with all the sign-offs and the revised RAP for our records, that concludes.
So air quality still outstanding, that's the only.
No. We have signed off.
Sorry, I'm,
So we have signed off on all aspects of the environmental
okay,
review.
all environmental sign-offs, sorry.
Okay. And if the statement of fact can be revised and submitted prior to tomorrow's hearing, that would be great.
And the EAS.
And the EAS.
But there are other comments. I would also, I'd not ask the applicant to review the tape for what the chair requested.
All right, because the chair has...
Because there were
Okay,
outstanding
sorry.
issues about the operational plan, et cetera, so.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Ron?
Yes, please do.
Item number 20, 2016-4153BZ, 4701 19th Avenue, Brooklyn. They're requesting an 8-week adjournment.
Yes, I need to read into
Yeah. I read it.
Madam Chair's comments, which is the submission was incomplete with respect to engineering requests.
Wait, no, that's
That's the
different.
next case,
That's the next
by Madam
case.
Vice Chair.
Oh, you might.
There are no, she has no notes for
She has
this
no
one.
notes.
She has
There are no
notes about
comments.
19th Street.
Yeah.
This is 19th Avenue.
19th Avenue is adjourned.
And she has comments about the next case, which.
I'm sorry.
It's okay, we're
It was
good.
actually my fault. I
There are no notes on that one.
There
We're
are no
talking.
notes on it,
Yeah.
and I don't have any notes on it either.
Because it's been adjourned.
Because it's adjourned, we didn't get a submission.
There was no submission, so
Trying
moving
to
on.
balance two comments, notes.
And I said 19, and I didn't
Nope, there's a lot-
finish looking
going
whether it was an
on.
avenue or a
Nope.
street.
I
I
am so
apologize.
sorry.
Okay.
Don't put two 19s on the same day.
We have enough restrictions. I don't know if we can handle that one.
Note to self.
So moving on to,
Item number
I think we can
21,
handle it.
2016-4208BZ, 142 West 19th Street,
Do you want me to read
Manhattan.
these?
I can read it.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm reading Madam Chair's comments. Submission submission was incomplete with respect to engineering request, and the staff directed the applicant to adjourn. While the instructions at the last hearing were very clear, I will reiterate slowly what it was the board had requested. Underpinning drawings and calculations of the proposed and the typical site, cost estimates based upon the same drawings and calculations of both and the proposed and typical sites with backup information for the quantity surveys. That is, how did the cost estimate arrive at the number of cubic yards of soil removal or square feet of sheeting? To clarify, a typical site is one with sandy soil, not rock. What we received was an underpinning drawing for a proposed project only without calculations. The cost estimate costed out a mat slab and sheeting and shoring. No backup to account for quantity surveys was included. The underpinning drawing shows footings, no mat slab, and neither sheeting nor shoring. So the cost estimates and drawings don't relate to each other. Do you have any addition to this?
No, just to clarify on the backup for the quantity survey, maybe it wasn't clear last hearing, although I believe it was, but let's say I'm gonna take just one line item from the underpinning cost estimate for the fractured rock condition coming from McLaughlin, and the item is the hand excavation fractured rock, that's what it says, and the quantity is 232 cubic yard at unit price of $350. The total is $81,200. What is submitted is good, but what we need is not just this. I need to know how the 232 cubic yards are reached. In other words, that's what I do. I look at the perimeter that's gonna be underpinned, which in this case is slightly above 100 linear feet. So I take this 100 times the width of the underpinning pier, which is about 3 feet, times the height of the underpinning pier, which is about another 3 feet. So this is 900 cubic foot. If I divide this by 27 to get it in cubic yards, the quantity is about 3540 cubic yards as compared to 232. I'm not sure about the exact number, but the difference between what is on the paper from McLaughlin and the numbers I run is huge. It's in the order of 5 times. So it's either they are getting something incorrectly, or I could be getting something incorrectly. That's why I'm asking them to give me the packet. The 232 need to be X times Y times Z, and I need to get explanations for each number of these, so I can follow up easily and wrap up this case and move forward. And this applies to all other line items in the cost estimate for the underpinning, of course.
Commissioner Otley Brown, do you have any comments?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Item number 22, 2016-4241BZ, 1 Maspeth Avenue, Brooklyn.
That's been administratively adjourned.
Item number 23, 2016-4262BZ, 279 Church Street, Manhattan. They requested an adjournment until May to discuss fire alarm installation with FDNY or install.
Right.
Either or. Item number, may I go on, Madam?
Yes, please.
Vice Chair? Item number 24, 2016-4271BZ, 201 Hampton Avenue, Brooklyn.
All right, I'm going to read Madam Chair's comments. We last heard this application, right, this is the one?
Yes.
We last heard this application in July, which was the first hearing, and with 2 adjournments since. We held a review session on this on October 2nd, but the applicant requested an adjournment, so we did not hold a hearing on the 3rd. The site is in flood zone AE 11, so under new board rule, this has to have This has to have a ZRD1, CCD1 to ensure compliance with flood regulations. Drawings were clarified to better understand retention of the existing material. There is note on Plan A1-PE, though that I don't understand. Have the architect come to explain it. Difference in plans, and the note is specific that the existing walls are CMU and brick, that note. Difference in plans between September 17 submission and today's second floor area increased by squaring off the corner and filling the area formerly open to below with a floor area, and at the attic entry squaring off the floor area to include it in plan with ceiling heights for 690 square feet of floor area. In September version, there were greater setbacks at the attic and bedroom areas contended as floor area, but didn't have a calculation chart then, so we couldn't compare. Cover letter states that there is a floor area calculation diagram, but there we couldn't find that. What is provided to us is a floor area chart. The diagram shown in plan exactly, the diagrams shows in plan exactly how the floor area is being added to each floor and how much floor area remains to support the chart. Regarding the height of the building, it's still 44 feet to the roof peak above grade, with 10 feet floor-to-floor height at first and second floor, and 12 foot, 7 foot to the roof peak, where the attic is labeled, are not being for sleeping purposes. However, this is a big difference, at least in elevation, between the September submission and this one, in that the ungainly dormers were eliminated, so the house is significantly less massive than it was. And I'm going to, this is a discussion I've not had with the chair, and I'm just going to read it. I think not counting existing structure towards floor area in the case where the building is in a flood zone is onerous, and asking, and I think this almost becomes the issue of a one-step, two-step case, where someone can build as of right, you lift it, and then you come back for the special permit. And I don't think that is something I am comfortable with, and in my prior discussion, there were other cases where we had this one-step, two-step, especially with regards to extending in the front, which is permitted as of right, and then this one-step, two-step issue had come up, and I was not comfortable with an applicant having to go through a one-step, two-step process. So in an earlier, so I actually am overall comfortable with the direction this project has taken, and they have reduced the height significantly, which was my major concern, especially in the center, and I'm okay with it.
I'm fine with this case.
Good. Madam,
Yes, please proceed.
item number 24, 2017-244 BZ, 2208 Bowler Avenue, the Bronx.
Number 25.
This is number 25.
I'm sorry, 25, sorry. 2208 Bowler Avenue.
Right.
I have the note, you want to?
Chair's comments are as follows. At the last hearing, we asked the applicant to hire an engineer to report on the stability of the support of excavation at the site where no work has taken place in years. A report was submitted, and
I did look at that report, and it mentions that it describes the excavation support system as soldier pile system, having 15 feet embedment and 10 feet stick-up. It says that the embedment is 15 feet below grades. I'm not sure what grades. I'm not sure what is the extent of the excavation, if any excavation performed at the site. How deep is that excavation? The report didn't mention that. And the 15 feet embedment, is it from the back, from the high, or is it from the low? If it's from the low, it need to be specified in the report. Also, that the report mentioned that based on the writer experience, the professional engineer who prepared the report, it says that the subsurface conditions in the area are generally compressible, soft material, which raised the red flag for me. Also, the report described that the beams used at the soldier piles are different from the beams specified on the drawings. It mentioned that the specified is 10 by 45, W10 by 45 soldier piles. The used ones are on the order of W8, so it's like 2 inches less. It also mentions that the grade of the steel, he's not sure about the grade of the steel. The timber lagging is 3 inch by 10 inch. There is no mention of the spacing between the beams, which is something that's very basic. If somebody's going to review an excavation support like this, it's like a must to mention how big is the beam, what is the embedment, and it is measured from where, and what is the spacing of the soldier beams. I didn't see the spacing in the report. I'll move to the conclusion section of the report, and in the conclusion, it says 2 things that, in my opinion, they contradicts each other totally. In the beginning of the conclusion, it says that the writer or the person who prepared the report, he's not sure about the steel grade. He's not sure about the embedment because that's what he's been told, that the embedment is 15 feet. And he indicated that further analysis need to be done to confirm. I read from the report, it says that the size and ASTM steel grade of the actual pile used will have to be ascertained, and an analysis of the as-built SOE system be conducted to verify its adequacy for the use intended. So in this paragraph here, he's saying that somebody needs to take a look at this system, check what steel grade, how strong that steel, what is the strength of that steel, and perform some engineering analysis and come up with a conclusion on the safety of that excavation support system. However, when we move to the end, it says this: based on our visual site inspections and review of available plans of the subject project, it is our opinion that the soldier pile and lagging SOE system as installed is structurally sound and accessible in its current conditions. So in the beginning, he says that he's not sure about the conditions. I'm not sure about the embedment. I'm not sure about the steel grade. Somebody need to take a look at these things and run engineering analysis and come up with a conclusion on the adequacy of this soldier pile and lagging system. In the second part of the conclusion, he says that based on my visual inspection, everything is okay, everything is safe, nothing need to be done. So I'm not sure which way the professional engineer who did this report wanna go. So this is my main comment and major concern on that report.
Can I just say that the response that was given was a response that was given as an answer to the request that, being that so much time has passed since the foundation was put in and today, I think the chair wanted some kind of review of what's in the ground to ensure that it actually hasn't deteriorated over time. And so I think that's why you're getting 2 different responses in the same article. So what it seems to me that what the writer of this statement is saying is that although they can't attest to whether or not the foundation system is the appropriate system to use for this type of construction, what has been put in the ground is still in good enough condition that it can support a structure above ground. So I believe that's why you're seeing 2 different, what you might think is conflicting evidence. So I think that the chair never really asked them whether or not the foundation system that's in the ground is the right foundation system to use for this construction.
No, by the way, the report is not entirely about the foundation system. The report is just for the excavation support. And I did see
Well, I guess then the excavation support, because it seemed like the question at the previous hearing was centered around the fact that a lot of time has passed, and because that time has passed, things might have deteriorated on site, and I believe the chair wanted the go-ahead that everything is still as it should be, and there hasn't been deterioration. That's my understanding of the conversation.
That's the takeaway I had also.
Because I don't know,
No, the engineer.
I don't know if the chair wanted an examination of the entire support system to determine whether or not that was the proper one. I believe that the chair would defer to DOB on that kind of a situation and let DOB be the determinant as to whether or not supportive excavation foundations are appropriate for the structure above and the surrounding areas. So I think we got what we wanted from that letter, which is that what is in the ground has not deteriorated and still functions as if it was supposed to initially.
I didn't realize the DOB part of it, but if that's the situation,
I believe it should have been submitted to the DOB, and I believe the DOB should review
well,
this.
they will review it
Yes.
if we approve this. I think it's too premature for DOB to review an application which is not.
Yes.
So the DOB is not going to approve that report before we approve this case and pass it through?
No,
Right.
right.
Okay, so here's my point. My understanding, according to their cover letter, is that we requested the preparation of this report because of some complaints from the adjacent property owners. I wasn't here at that hearing, but that's what I read in their cover letter. If this is the case, and the adjacent building owners complain that it could be some damage occurred to their properties, it should be a review done for that excavation support system. And according to the report submitted, the writer of the report mentioned that he's reviewing that structural excavation support system. He said he's reviewing this, and he's submitting to us. If he's reviewing that and he's submitting this to us, he has the right to either say, everything is okay, I have no comment with that, I have no concern, or he says we need to do more to make sure that this system is okay and intact. He said both, actually, and this is my concern. I'm not saying, in this report, there is nothing for me to review, but this is like a very superficial general comment. He's mentioning two things.
I thought he did.
Perhaps he can appear tomorrow and clear this up, if that's,
Well,
the
I
applicant
think the
can
engineer
provide a
task was
follow-up.
to inspect the site, and he looked at the site condition, and he identified that there has been no structural damage, as it was stated
Correct,
by the
yes.
applicant, by the neighbors,
Yes.
to any of the surrounding buildings, and the site condition that as it stands, the structure as it stands is structurally stable, which were, again, I'm reiterating what Commissioner
That's-
Otley
that-
Brown has
that's
stated.
true, that's
And I think
true.
that's all we needed for this.
That's what we asked for?
Right.
But
I think
I'm
what
just saying.
he may have jumped and kind of said something about in terms of whether, for future construction, whether this will be adequate or not. That's not what he is being asked to review, because they may need to do whatever additional construction work that structurally they would need, and that would be per DOB approval. For right now, we wanted them to review just what that structure was and how, or if at all, it was affecting structural stability of the buildings abutting the
Yes,
site.
and I agree. And he said
they
no
have-
damage to the
no da-
existing
And I think that
buildings,
was
yes.
the question before us, and they have addressed that question.
And that would be the same even for an as-of-right development.
And as of right development,
It
right,
wouldn't matter.
yeah. That's true, yeah.
And it's also consistent with what the chair has requested on other
Right.
cases where there have been allegations of damage being done to neighboring properties.
Yes. I want to read additional comments the chair had, that we did receive approval, Community Board 10 approval, and also letter of support from Councilmember King and Assemblymember Benedetta. Drawings were revised to remove the excessive detail, but some of the dimension lines were removed that still have floating dimensions. Please correct that. The site plan must show the dimensions of the lot and of the outside dimensions of the buildings. Bubbles should be removed as well. So maybe they can submit two plans, one that shows the bubbles indicating where the changes have been made, and the final one that would be part of the plan. There should also be a clean set, okay? We had also asked that the areas of the non-compliance for which the waivers are being sought be shown in the plans and the sections. We didn't receive that. Based on the revised BSA zoning calculation chart, waivers are requested for floor area, lot coverage, heights and setback, front and rear yard and parking. Since no rear yard is required, that's an error, because these are two corner lots, so therefore you won't be required. So yes, please do. A side yard waiver is required and should be corrected on the chart. The proposed, instead of the rear yard, it's actually side yards, right? you require 20-foot deep side yards if it's a corner lot. So it's not a rear yard, it should be side yards.
Is the DOB objection correct?
Actually, that's a good point. I don't know if the DOB objection cites that. But if they are citing the section number, then that is the more relevant part of it. It's then, we're then mincing just terminology. Please, a side yard waiver is required and should be corrected on the chart. The proposed wall height on the chart and on the drawings don't match. Make sure that the bulkheads of the stair elevators and the mechanical equipment are shown on the plans and sections with their heights. A parking analysis was prepared based on the existing facility located half a mile from the subject site and which accommodates 125 seats in the sanctuary. The study concludes that on-street parking is currently at or near capacity, but that parking has been made available to the congregation at the Co-op City parking garage across the street, and that there is adequate capacity there. If we rest on this study, then we would need to make the relationship with the Co-op City garage a requirement for the duration of this use. Otherwise, I don't know whether the observation of parishioners who walk to services and the relationship of their homes to this location will satisfy the requirements of the CPC parking reduction special permit that we often use as a guide for parking waivers for houses of worship. At the last hearing, I asked the applicant to correct the statement of findings, and that wasn't done properly, especially with regards to finding A. House of worship is not a programmatic need. It is a deference under the Cornell doctrine, coupled with when present with unique physical conditions about the site. Programmatic needs analysis aids the board to determine finding E of the minimum variance necessary. We received a chart showing how the rooms will be utilized and according to what schedule.
Sure. Are all okay with this explanation of the spaces and programmatic need for them? At the last hearing, we asked whether the EAS needed to be updated. A short form EAF was submitted. Is that sufficient?
So let me start with the reverse one. Is the EAF sufficient?
Well, I'm waiting they were going to hire an environmental consultant to address all of the EAS comments, so I was going to ask what is the update on that, because I haven't seen any new response to that.
Okay. I think that's an EAS and not an EAF.
Oh, sorry. EAS, sorry.
Yeah. With regards to the programmatic need that was submitted, I looked through it, and in terms of, now that they have reduced the subcellar, it's just the cellar and the remaining floors, and so some of the programmatic spaces are being consolidated, so I think the utilization has improved on the space, and I was satisfied with the programmatic documents that were submitted.
I don't think that the programmatic documents have provided enough information for us to arrive at an E finding. Aside from the listing of the rooms, there's no way of knowing how many people access the following spaces to know whether or not it's the minimum variance or whether the building could actually be smaller. There's no discussion in the findings as to the program, who's accessing the program, how often they're accessing the program. For any of the programs, that goes for the fellowship hall, that provides the senior citizen meals and the recreation program. There's nothing in the statement about the meals program or the recreation program. How many senior citizens are accessing it, when it's occurring, there's nothing about that. The same thing for the sanctuary. We know the congregation size, and we know that they want to worship all at one time. The classrooms have to be used as a nursery during the week and Sunday school on the weekends, but there's no information in the application as to how many young people are going to be in the nursery and how many young people are going to be in the Sunday school to let us know whether the amount of classrooms is excessive or whether it's the minimum necessary. Same thing for the offices.
Okay, I looked at it in a different way, because this project was before us, and it did make the programmatic need argument, and based on which we had granted the bulk. And at that time, it had a much bigger floor area, gross floor area, because it also had the subcellar and the cellar. And because of the site condition and I guess other reasons, they have eliminated one of the floor area. So the programmatic elements that they had submitted before has not changed. That is still the same. Only thing is being contained in a much smaller floor.
This is a new variance case with a new number, and therefore the entire application has to be complete under this variance case number. You cannot refer to a previous case and say, please refer to that case. Everything's changed, or some things have changed and some things remain the same. This is a new case, has to make the findings on its own,
Okay,
which means
fair
that
point.
even if they take copies of the previous application
Fair
and
point.
submit it, they need to at least do that.
Okay. Yes. For our record, we need to have that consistent. Okay. I grant you that.
And let's go. We good? Move on.
Yep, we are good.
New cases, item number 1, 8915BZ, 92 Walworth Street, Brooklyn. Do you want me to read the comments, Madam Vice
No,
Chair?
I'm fine.
You good? You good?
Yes, thank you. Maybe we can do tag team. I find proof of service of initial application to the officials and proof of notice appearing to the officials and neighbors. Community board declined to hear this application. Regarding the hardships complained of, while I see that a business on a narrow street can make deliveries difficult, I don't see that is a condition unique to this lot, nor are the surrounding uses. Regarding allowable uses in the M11, the statement of finding goes on at some length about how the surrounding uses at this site is by yeshiva and synagogues. Why then couldn't this site be sold to one of them for a viable as-of-right use? According to the earlier submitted land use map, the site is actually surrounded by community facility and manufacturing uses, and there is very little residential on the immediate block. A later land use map uses only color coding and appears to show the adjacent properties on one side are entirely residential without designation, labels, or tax lots on the area map, and it's not possible to follow the supporting data in the chart. Provide documentation that the lot has been held in single ownership since prior to 1961. Regarding proposed building, which is being raised above grade at 3'6", what is the reason for that? Plus, the floor-to-floor height is at 11'4", which is tall compared to many of the residential projects we see here. How do you justify the dramatic height difference between this building compared to its one-story neighbor on either side across the street? We are looking at known existing conditions here, not future unknown conditions. Also, since the building has no elevator, what is the reason for a 12-foot, 8-inch high bulkhead? Provide drawings that the height from the base, provide on the notes, the drawing notes, the height from the base plane to the roof. The site is not in a flood zone, and we need phase 2 sign-off and general sign-off on the EAS. I just want to put a note there, and I don't know if this affects the environmental review. Per Google satellite map, the site has a trailer and construction-related vehicles inside the site. Please provide updated photos of the interior condition. I also want to, I did not have issues with the uniqueness. I will let Commissioner Otley Brown weigh in on the financial. With regards to the neighborhood character, this block is almost like a 50-50. Western portion of the block is predominantly residential. The rest is a mix of manufacturing and community facility. And the residential buildings are mostly 3 to 4 stories with community facility uses, and most of these sites are built to 2.5 FAR. What the applicant is proposing in terms of the FAR is very much in that range. And I also want to just be able to say that the land use is changing in this area. There has been City Planning Commission approvals granted in the area that is changing the uses from manufacturing to mixed use. The block behind it to the south of it is actually an MX zone, which allows manufacturing use, and R6, which is what this development is trying to build to, an R6 zoning. And I believe there are a couple of other zoning actions before City Planning Commission, which is also on the block to the south, which is also looking at mix of uses. So I think for me, the change of use and the bulk is less of an issue. I am curious as to why the floor to ceiling height is that much, but other than that, I really didn't have an issue on the neighborhood character.
I have a few financial comments. The first one is linked to the plans to the as-of-right. The plans to the as-of-right has a one-story and mezzanine, I guess, industrial manufacturing use, and it seems to, the architect seems to believe that they require a 20-foot rear yard, and I don't believe that's necessary. And so having the mezzanine impacts, I believe, the construction cost and also the income for this site. So I think they really need to revise this to be a one-story, full lot coverage building for the as-of-right scenario, and then show that that doesn't work. I think that the construction costs will most probably come down because it's probably cheaper to have a single-story structure rather than a structure that needs a support system to support a mezzanine. As to the apartment rents, I think there's an error in the amount of cellar space that's actually being valued. It seems like they're only providing income for 300 square feet of the cellar space, but if you look at the plans, the cellar space that's actually used as the lower floor of the apartment amounts to somewhere around 600 square feet, and so making that correction should increase the first floor apartment rent. And that's basically all I have.
Commissioner
No, I
Shetty?
have no.
Okay, next case, please.
Okay, item number 2, 2017-221BZ, 1781 Bay Ridge Parkway, Brooklyn.
So we have proof of service of initial application to officials and proof of service of, or notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Committee board recommended approval. Site looks pretty clean after some recent sprucing up, but the landscaping is crappy in some places and needs to be replaced or infilled. Proper drawing proposed drawings represent that spotty character and should be revised to show the continuous dense shrubbery growth to 6-foot height that acts as a buffer between the site and the adjoining residential property. The drawings approved in 1999 showed dense planting as well. Slatting at the fence behind the dumpster should be replaced. The lumen spread diagram shows that the lighting is spreading along the perimeter shared with the residential property. The lights that are causing it must be turned away and shielded. I had no comments. I mean, apart from that, I agree that the planting is a little spotty and it can be improved.
So the variance expired in 2009. Shouldn't we have proof of continuous use since then for a reinstatement? They have not provided that.
Oh, okay. Right. I thought they did.
Anything
They
else?
provided some photos and, but they,
I didn't see it.
yeah. All right, so please provide us with, yeah.
Okay, anything else? That's it? Okay.
Yep.
This
Thank you.
concludes the public review session, February 12, 2018.